A major strike all across the East Coast just hours away. And right now, a massive effort is underway to try to get community after community back online in the Southeast. That's Topping the Hill on NewsNation. We just need water, and it looks like hell. That is what some residents across the Southeast United States are saying and dealing with this evening. Now, 4 days after a monster Category 4 hurricane. In the western parts of North Carolina, the famed Lake Lure, as you see there, looking more like a timber yard. And in the city of Asheville, many parts of that community destroyed. Officials there say at least 35 people from that beautiful mountain town were killed in the hurricane. North Carolina's governor trying to reassure residents today while also warning of the continuing dangers.
Rivers are rising right now as we speak. What we want to tell people is that more help is on the way.
Now, among the challenges, running water in places is offline in parts of North Carolina, and still millions of Americans across the Southeast remain without power. Those, as you can see there, in and around Helene's path. Here in Washington, President Biden speaking from the Oval Office moments ago.
And to the survivors, I want you to know the administration is going to be there, and we just talked about this, until we finish the job. It's going to take a hell of a long time and a serious amount of assets.
There are many communities all across the Southeast United States this evening that are absolutely devastated and still trying to pick up the pieces, and will be that way for quite some time. None perhaps more so than in Asheville, North Carolina, and in the areas around that mountain town. That's where we begin tonight with our Mills Hayes, who is just outside of Asheville. Mills?
Hey, Blake. Yeah, I'm out here in Swannanoa, North Carolina. That's about 10 miles outside of Asheville. I've been speaking to people who live here. They tell me that to say this storm left behind devastation is an understatement. Take a look at this business right here. This is a tattoo parlor shop, or at least it used to be. Now it's covered with debris and wood and mud, all left over from that flood water. And check out the parking lot as well. Slabs of asphalt ripped off from that parking lot area because of how much water came through this area. I want to take you over to where the river is. You guys can actually see the river from here. But I was talking to one of the business owners who owns one of that business over there, and he tells me that before the storm came through, you couldn't even see the river. There was so much trees and brushes that was here that you couldn't see the river at all. And the same goes for the other side as well. Multiple homes over there completely leveled. You can kind of see the foundations of some of them. You can also see some cars that are flipped over as well. Really just complete damage over here. And it is something that is very, very concerning for the people who live here, because it's not only this damage, but it's also those supplies they're running out of: food, water, gas, all of those things that are crucial right now. And yes, we keep hearing from government officials about the help that is on the way. But a lot of the people that I speak with here tell me that they need help now, and they need it fast. So as I'm talking to these people, you can just feel the emotion. This is a town that many of them have lived in since they were born. This is a close-knit community, and for it to now be almost leveled, it is really, really devastating for the people here, Blake.
Our Mills Hayes live for us tonight just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Mills, thank you. Hurricane Helene, as you can see there, has left historic devastation in the state of North Carolina. At least 39 residents have been confirmed dead. Nearly 460,000 currently without power in that one state alone. More than 100 roads, for example, have been cleared. Nearly 300 still remain impassable. Joining us live is the congressman from one of the local districts there. He is the Republican from the state of North Carolina, Chuck Edwards. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate the time, sir. What do you need most? What do your residents need most there in western North Carolina where you are?
I'm not sure that we can narrow it down to what we need most. We simply need resources. We need roads cleared. We need communications. Cell service is out still in most areas, even the areas that have it. It is sporadic at best. We need gasoline. We have gas stations that don't have power but have generators. I've had residents tell me it's taken them 3 hours to get 5 gallons of gasoline because gas is being rationed right now. We need grocery distribution centers up and running and grocery stores restocked. We need power restored. Water is a real critical issue right now.
I was going to ask you about the water, Congressman. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the water because much of the water in parts of that state right now, the water systems are offline still at this hour. And we're hearing stories of residents seeking out bottled water, just trying to get any that they can. Where does that stand right now? And when should all the water systems be back online as you know it?
Well, as far as bringing the water systems back online, there's no telling. Many of the systems have to be rebuilt totally. The city of Asheville, for example, had a very fragile water system in the first place. And with so much damage, road and bridge damage, we've seen massive water lines washed out. We've seen pump stations destroyed. It may take some time before we see the typical city utility water back online.
Is Washington helping out? Is the government helping out as you know it? Obviously, you're a member of Congress. You know how Washington works, but I wonder if you feel that the federal government's giving your area everything that it needs.
The response has been disappointing.
How so?
We've begun to see some resources brought in today, but the storm was over about 80 hours ago. The storm was over about 10 a.m. on Friday. We knew that the storm was coming, and only today are we beginning to see the first FEMA employees and trailers and helicopters.
How's that possible, Congressman? I mean, how's that possible? This was no secret that Asheville was going to get historic flooding.
Yeah, I can't tell you how it was possible, but the people in Western North Carolina feel let down, deservedly so. Our state response has been terrible. You know, North Carolina Emergency Management Services are responsible for administering the initial FEMA funding to bring in resources. They've been extremely slow to respond. But today we're beginning to see some signs of some resources coming in, and I'm promised by the White House and I'm promised by the North Carolina governor that we're going to see a surge from this point forward, and we're going to get the resources that the people in these mountains desperately need.
Yeah, Congressman, as you know, it is an historic situation there in many parts of Western North Carolina and will continue to be a focus here in the upcoming days. Congressman Chuck Edwards from North Carolina, thank you for being with us tonight in your vehicle. I'm sure you got somewhere important to go to try to help folks in your hometown. Thank you, sir.
Certainly. Thanks for your interest.
You got it. All right, joining me tonight here on The Hill, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, NewsNation political editor as well, and Julia Manchester, national political reporter for TheHill.com. Hello to you both. Nice to have you in on this Monday. There's this storm, and we see this time and time again. That answer, unfortunately, is not surprising, that the help hasn't come as fast as the folks on the ground would like it. Julia, you have a story up on The Hill right now. Trump seeks to put Harris on back foot with hurricane response.
Yep. So we never want to try to politicize these events. This is awful what's happening. And, you know, we obviously really feel for the people that are struggling with this. But the fact of the matter is this storm is happening during an election year. And you are seeing both of the candidates obviously talking about this. Harris in her role as vice president, visiting FEMA and talking about the administration's response and the federal response. Trump, though, over the weekend criticized Harris and Biden for not coming out, to the disaster zone, back to Washington soon enough. She was in Nevada fundraising, out west fundraising. But, you know, it's interesting because this is all obviously taking place during election year, and two of the states hit hardest by this, North Carolina and Georgia.
North Carolina. Yeah.
Major swing states could be decided by tens of thousands of votes. So the responses from both of these candidates could be deciding factors. I'm not saying they're going to be the deciding factor, but could play a role.
So Donald Trump in Valdosta, Georgia earlier today, just a little while ago, the Vice President Kamala Harris here in Washington at FEMA headquarters.
In a time like this, when a crisis hits, when our fellow citizens cry out in need, none of that matters.
We will continue to do everything we can to help you recover and to help you rebuild, no matter how long it takes. And I do believe the true character of a nation is revealed in moments of hardship.
So if you've ever lived through a storm, Chris, or covered one or both, you know they are awful, they stink, they change lives. But as Julia notes, and the reality is we saw Donald Trump in Georgia today, Kamala Harris get off the trail, come back to Washington today. What's the dynamic at play right now for both of them?
Well, Julia said that we do not wish to politicize natural disasters and human suffering, but that will not stop a campaign from doing it. And we know the most famous example of this is that the devastation around Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in late 2005, Democrats hung that around George W. Bush's neck.
Heck of a job, Randy.
Yeah, hung that around George W. Bush's neck, made it part of a overall narrative that they were selling for the 2006 midterms that Democrats had great success in. Since then, it has become a trope in American politics that whenever there's a disaster, whoever's not in power says, these people hate you and they don't care about you, because if they cared about you, you would have everything that you needed instantaneously. And if I was in power, you would be sleeping on a bed of marshmallows. You would be lifted high into the heavens and you'd have everything that you wanted if I was in charge.
The congressman who we just interviewed, I couldn't help but note, is a Republican. That state run by a Democrat. The, of course, White House is controlled by a Democrat. You want to take him at his words at face value that they haven't got what they needed, and I do take them at face value, but there's also that dynamic there of the Democrats, Republicans, and that's sort of the game.
That's the most Republican part of North Carolina.
Out where this happens.
That's the most Republican part.
Right, absolutely. And, you know, zooming in on Nashville in particular, which is sort of Asheville, excuse me, blue part of Western North Carolina. I think what's so fascinating is that it is a Democratic stronghold in that area, and this is coming as early voting is kicked off, mail-in voting. I'm curious to see if this storm, impacts turnout in any way there.
Well, I mean, the rain falleth on the red and the blue, because, yes, there are, and I love you, Asheville, and I've enjoyed all my time in Asheville. But once you take out all the baristas and the folks who live there in Asheville, that area is overwhelmingly 2-1 Republican. That part of East Tennessee and that part of North Carolina.
All right, still to come here on the Hill on News Nation. We start our swing state spotlight here on the Hill, where we bring you on-the-ground reporting from some of the most important states in this election. Today, we start with our Nexstar affiliate, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where Dennis Owens will report from the state capitol building.
Hey, Blake, greetings from this battleground where the presidential candidates are fighting over the natural gas coming out of the ground. We'll tell you about that coming up.
All right, Dennis, and Steyerwald is here to break down exactly why this state will be so critical in November. Plus, are we looking at a major port strike once the clock strikes midnight tonight? How this could make your holiday shopping even more expensive this year. That potentially just one of the fallouts. All that when the Hill on News Nation returns. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. Special series this week in conjunction with our fellow Nexstar reporters who know their own communities and states inside and out. All week, we are taking a close-up look at the key issues at play in the battleground states, which will likely decide this election one way or another. Tonight, we travel just up the road here from Washington to Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, where the issue of fracking, that is extracting oil and natural gas from underground formations, that is one of the major campaign issues. Dennis Owens is the veteran political reporter at our Harrisburg, PA station, WHTM, joins us live. Dennis, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. So the issue of fracking, what are you seeing there in Pennsylvania?
Well, Blake, to turn a phrase, there is gold in them thar hills. Consider this, Pennsylvania is second only to Texas in the amount of natural gas it produces. It is number one in the nation in the amount of gas it exports. That, of course, means jobs. It helps the economy in a number of ways. Electric customers have been getting cheaper bills for several years now because of the natural gas boom. Landowners get royalty checks. That's, of course, a big deal. And state coffers and local community coffers, because of an impact fee, have gotten more money. It's a big deal, certainly, to the presidential candidates. You know, it was in the debate. It was an entire topic. Donald Trump pointing out that Kamala Harris a couple years ago promised to ban fracking. She just as vociferously saying, I don't believe that any longer, and I haven't banned fracking as vice president. So it is certainly a big deal to the candidates. But the real question, will fracking impact the meter? Will it move the vote one way or another for average Pennsylvanians? We checked in with our political consultants on that, and that's more of a mixed bag.
She was jumping through hoops to say she was going to ban it on day one. And now she says she's learned and gotten smarter about that issue. I hope that's true. I hope it's not just because Pennsylvania is, a key battleground state. Because, look, we all need secure amounts of energy, regardless of where it comes from.
I would be shocked if it's mid-November and we're saying that fracking won or lost this election for either candidate.
And the reason she's saying that is because most of the natural gas is where most of the people aren't. The big population centers, Philadelphia, right. Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Scranton, they don't have the natural gas, so it's there every day. So it's not as big a deal to the people, but it's certainly an important deal to the economy.
Right. Yeah, Dennis, obviously the economy is issue number one. That's anywhere you go in this country, swing states or not. When you talk to folks there across Pennsylvania, fracking, where, and I know, as you said, it's different depending on where you live, but where does that stand? Is that in the, 3 or 4? Is that more down the line, 7, 8, 9, so on?
I think it's more down the line because I think a lot of people don't really understand the impact that it has had on the economy and that a lot of their energy bills have been lower. Certainly the people that live where it's happening know about it. And it's interesting because up on the Pennsylvania-New York border, New York banned fracking because of environmental concerns in 2014. A lot of people on the New York side are not experiencing the wealth that some of the people on the Pennsylvania side in a region that was really basically had passed them by. It's been a new boom for them. You're seeing new trucks up there, new roads, all kinds of new things there that they don't have in New York. So it's an issue where they are, and the economy, as you said, is the top issue here in Pennsylvania.
Dennis Owens, thank you, sir. Good luck the next 5 weeks or so. It's obviously the key story in the Keystone State. Dennis Owens, thank you, sir.
Fun times.
Yep. All right, so Pennsylvania, obviously key. Chris Steyerwalt, let's zoom out here, 30,000-foot level, give or take. You've got the numbers, the issues. Tell me.
You know what I like, brother. Oh, you know what I like.
We're in your sweet spot, my man.
Here we are.
This is the time.
Right.
5 weeks to go. So basically, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, where are they? What are their weaknesses and strengths here in the last month or so?
Kamala Harris can't win the election without Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Donald Trump could, but it'd be a lot easier if he did. It's got 19 electoral votes. It's a big deal. The question for Donald Trump would be, where do you get 80,000 votes in Pennsylvania? That's about what he would need to make up the difference. So let's start with who's strong where. Okay. No surprise for Joe Biden, best place, Philadelphia County. Right. And then these suburbs are different. When we look at the collar counties around Philadelphia, that's Trumpier to the north and east, closer to Jersey. To the south and west, that's more Democratic. Those are the old blue bloods. That's that jazz over there. So that's the strongest place. What Biden did in Philadelphia County to win that Hillary Clinton couldn't do, he got 20,000 more votes out of Philadelphia County than Hillary Clinton did. He turned them out. So that's the name of the game there. Okay. Where is it for Donald Trump? Where do you want to go for Donald Trump? Show us on the magic picture board. I'm so excited to see it. And there it is. Okay, so we talk about, you were talking to our colleague in Harrisburg. This is the T, the middle of Pennsylvania. So it goes up in the middle and it goes out to the sides. And the old joke, and we all know it about Pennsylvania, we love you. As a West Virginian, I say this with love. It's Philadelphia and Pittsburgh with Alabama in the middle. Okay. Very red. These are rural counties, relatively small counties. That's suburban Pittsburgh. That's central. What's Trump's goal? Just kill it, right? Get turnout as high as possible. What are the counties that shift? What are the swingiest swing counties in the swingiest swing state? Great question. I'm glad you asked. Thanks, Magic Wall. Erie County is the bellwether of Pennsylvania. What's in Erie County? Right over there is Cleveland. Right up there is Buffalo. It's industrial, Great Lakes, that vibe. And then Northampton County. And we know this is that part of Pennsylvania. And this is where you find Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton. This is Luzerne County's right over there. That's where we get all that jazz. These are the counties that flipped from Obama to Trump, from Trump to Biden. These are the places that will tell us what's going down.
So on election night, Chris Stirewalt is looking at Erie County, Northampton County. Once the numbers start rolling in, forget the totals, forget the percentages, so on and so forth. This is where you're going.
Yeah, Luzerne County, Northampton County, Erie County. This is where it is. But it's that. But those are interesting bellwethers. They're going to tell us where it's going. But what we're really going to want to know is turnout juiced in which places? Because if Philadelphia is coming out big, and so is the rural area, then I like Harris's chances if the turnout is big. If turnout's down a little bit from 2020, then you got to like Trump's chances.
Stirewalt breaks it down.
We did it.
Thank you, sir. You know what I want to know?
What?
Is there going to be a port strike?
Oh.
That would be a massive story here.
I don't have anything on that.
The numbers on that. Port strike, though. Massive strike could be happening here within the next 5.5 hours or so. Could shut down ports all across the East Coast, why the White House won't stop it, why one senator is pleading for help, and how all of this could soon be felt in your pocketbook. Plus, guess who likes it now? The Biden administration now doubling down on tougher restrictions at the southern border. Why are they doing that? Plus, the massive effort now underway to provide basic essentials. Parts of the southeast United States offline. Why and how that didn't stop one father from missing his daughter's wedding. Wait until you hear this one. Kelly Meyer, by the way, joins us on the other side of the break. That's when The Hill returns. Apocalyptic and unprecedented. Just some of what residents in the southeastern United States say they are dealing with this evening after the monster Category 4 Hurricane Helene. As we know it at this hour, there are at least 132 deaths across 6 states in this country due to the storm. At least 600 people, though, remain unaccounted for. More than 1 million people still without power this evening from Florida up to North Carolina. Many parts of western North Carolina dealing with historic flooding. Drinking water, now a hot commodity, as water systems in parts of that state are still offline.
People are working around the clock to provide help to them right now. Food, water, working hard to make sure that we've got shelters open all across this area.
As you might know, in times like these, you see stories of inspiration, and here's one of them. A father telling our Next Star station, WJHL in Eastern Tennessee, how he walked over 30 miles, more than 7 hours, just to make sure he could walk his own daughter down the aisle.
I said, you have to understand, my daughter's getting married at 11 o'clock this morning, and I'm going to be there to walk her down the aisle.
That's so emotionally moving that my dad loves me that much, that he would come and go through all of that to get to my wedding.
Still, though, tonight, many are wondering when normal might come again. President Biden today spoke on 2 different occasions from the White House.
I want you to know the administration is going to be there, and we just talked about this until we finish the job. It's going to take a hell of a long time. I'm going to North Carolina on Wednesday. It's planned now.
Our Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent, joins us now. Hello, Kelly. Good evening. You were at the White House all day today. We had a Republican congressman from North Carolina in that hard-hit area of Asheville on at the top of the show. He said that they're not getting the resources that they need fast enough. What was the White House saying today?
Yeah, and they were saying the exact opposite, that they have been making sure that they are getting everything they need to these areas. The president has been briefed last night, today, by FEMA. They were just going through it as he was speaking just earlier, saying that 3,500 personnel, 1,000 from FEMA, 1.9 million meals ready to eat, 30 generators going out, talking about Starlink, making sure people have communication access. So the president says they are working nonstop to make sure that they have what they need.
The president's in an interesting spot because he is a lame duck. His term ends January 20th. Lame duck presidents, you can control foreign policy and respond to natural disasters. That's exactly what President Biden has before him right now, whether it's overseas or in our own backyard here.
And you see him jumping in here, and this is especially something you see President Biden, we've seen in the past, especially when it comes to situations of loss, where he really jumps in and tries to speak to those impacted, the empathy that a lot of people say that he has. So you've seen him speak, as you mentioned earlier today, so twice from the White House today, as well as tonight. This is something that he's taking full advantage of in this position that he's in with these last final few months in office. And then he said he's going to be traveling to these areas, and then he says we'll stay with them until the very end and see this through.
North Carolina on Wednesday for the president. Kelly Meyer. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, still here on the Hill as the Southeast begins to pick up the pieces. The South Carolina Senator Tim Scott is pleading tonight with one of the country's biggest unions to not go on strike. At midnight tonight, the International Longshoremen's Association, which represents some 85,000 port workers, says many of their workers, by the thousands, are planning to walk off the job. That includes ports in the Southeast that deliver goods to hard-hit areas and beyond. Now, the strike would ripple across the economy and potentially right to your pocketbook. Here was Senator Scott earlier today saying, quote, at least 100 Americans have died, millions have been without power, and flooding continues to devastate homes and communities in the aftermath of Helene. He says, I urge the members of the International Longshoremen's Association to temporarily continue working under their contract until the suffering from the storm has eased. Now, even before the storm, those in the industry were warning against a potential strike.
If it goes for a few weeks, it gets pretty ugly. A week is probably okay. If it gets into several months period, you're going to talk about second order effects where you can't really predict what'll happen.
So this could have huge implications going into the election, into the holidays. You would think the administration would want to be at the table with these parties, seeing it through.
All right, so let me walk you through some of this here. If the strike happens tonight at midnight, as expected, you're talking about ports all the way from Boston, New England, down to Florida, Miami, and out west to Houston, Texas, some 36 ports in more than a dozen different areas. Now, what would this impact? Goods just about of every single kind. Clothing, footwear, basically all the things that are in your refrigerator, autos, so on and so forth down the line. You name it, it probably will be impacted. Now for some context here, a 20-foot container, those big things that come through the ports, these things, here's what you could fit in just one 20-foot container. 200 full-size mattresses, 48,000 bananas, for example, 50 or so refrigerators, and 400 flat-screen televisions, just one container. Now, here's what the International Longshoremen's Association is demanding. They want a pay increase of some 76% over the next 6 years, and they are worried, really, about automation. No automation at the terminals, or at least that's part of their demands. The White House, President Biden, as you know, says, you know what? I am the most pro-union president of all time. He could jump in and stop this strike if he wanted to. But the White House says, as of this moment, that's not happening.
We encourage all parties to come to the bargaining table and negotiate in good faith. We have never invoked the Taft-Hartley to break a strike and are not considering doing so now. But this is a president that has been called a pro-union president by the labor unions.
Joining me now, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. May Mailman, as well, former Trump White House attorney, director of the Independent Women's Law Center. Hello to you both.
Hello.
May, nice to see you.
Hey, Blake.
Back here in Washington for the first time in quite some time. The president has an issue on his hands. Scott, he's
keeping his fingers crossed.
He's keeping his well. He stopped the rail strike a couple years ago.
That's right.
He's not stopping this one.
Yeah.
That reeks of electoral politics, does it not?
Not necessarily. I think
so?
He's keeping his fingers crossed. 14 of those ports that you just had up on the wall, 9 of them have had Helene come through there and have some devastation.
Hence Tim Scott saying, please don't do this.
Tim Scott could add that statistic to his request. I think behind the scenes, the president is pushing hard on both sides and basically telling the unions, don't make me do this. Don't make me make you go back to work, cut a deal, or at least put it off until we can get a deal done.
He could do it via what's known as Taft-Hartley. I'm not going to go through the weeds, but it's basically the president, the White House could go down this road. How come they're not?
Yeah, this has been used more than 30 times since it was enacted in 1947. So this is a common measure. President Biden has never invoked it, and he says he's not going to invoke it now. Why is he not doing it? Theories. One, he hates Kamala Harris, right? He wants to tank the whole thing. Okay, second theory.
Next.
He's trying to buy the union vote. But this is a 77% increase. On top of, longshoremen are already paid about $150,000. These are really massive requests. This is going to devastate not just the economy. We can say the economy.
No, but this
is going to devastate. People are going to die because they can't get food.
So,
they can't get things they need.
So the union says that they're not going to go after them. They would continue on with military shipments, obviously, and I think that goes after Taft-Hartley because of national security.
Yeah.
And they'll let you on to their cruises. But beyond that, I just wonder how far, Scott, this goes before the president eventually steps in because, Time Magazine, here's what they wrote back in 2022. Of what they said. Put it up on the screen real quick. They said Biden decided the broader economy was a bigger priority than the 100,000 freight rail workers having any paid sick leave in their next contract. After campaigning as the most pro-union presidential candidate in history, Biden signed into law a measure that makes a rail strike illegal. That was then. At what point does he bend and go back to that point now?
I think he's pressing and bending right now behind the scenes. I don't think if they do strike, and my gut tells me that either they won't, they'll put it off, or within 5 days, if they do strike, something's going to give. Because this is a national disaster, not just Helene, the impact of Helene, but also up and down the eastern seaboard. The country can't afford that. And so Biden is playing almost chicken with the unions, if you will, but somebody's got to blink.
Yeah. He can invoke this act at any time. It's not just national security. It's the nation's health. It's health or safety. So the fact that
medical supplies, so on and so forth.
Medical supplies, just bananas. Like the fact that you can't get fresh food into this country like that already with the hurricanes devastation, and then add the impact of this not being able to unload ships. The time to act was yesterday. I really, and then there's a vice presidential debate. Tomorrow
night, right. I hope they get asked about
this. But there
are
some politics because he's a Democratic president.
Right. There are Democratic politics in play. So if there is a long-term strike on the East Coast, they will be able to ship goods out to the West Coast. But you know how that goes. Ships stack up and prices go. It could be inflation all over again if it gets to that point. All right, still to come here on the Hill. You two stick around. Donald Trump has a new election interference claim. How it involves the United States Secret Service and what he can and cannot do. Plus, why is the Biden administration all of a sudden taking a tougher stance on the southern border? The full panel after the break.
All this week, it's Debate Night in America. Tuesday, the CBS Vice Presidential Debate simulcast. Then only on NewsNation. Back-to-back Senate debates from battleground states Virginia and Pennsylvania. All this week on NewsNation.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill. Donald Trump not happy tonight as some restrictions placed against him, and he's calling it election interference. Now, over the weekend, the former president was forced to move an outdoor rally into an indoor venue in Wisconsin, a capacity that meant only 750 supporters could join. Trump now claims that Democrats are, quote, interfering with my campaign by not giving us the proper number of people within Secret Service that are necessary for security. Our Joe Khalil has been following the former president and his security for quite some time now. Joe, I guess this is the balancing act for the Secret Service, right?
So this is a resource issue. This is something that's going to happen more and more, right? When you've got somebody like Donald Trump, who very much, we all know, cares about the crowd size, the optics of a large outdoor rally. And then you've got the Secret Service, who now, as we said last week, they're living every single day like it's the day after July 13th, a zero-failed mission. These things are going to come into conflict sometimes. Much easier to secure a smaller indoor venue significantly than it is a bigger one. And let's remember, you've got active threats against Donald Trump. Let's also remember last week what you had in New York, the UN General Assembly, where the Secret Service had to protect not 10, not 20, but 140 world leaders. And remember, they now have a higher threshold for the amount of protection, the level of protection, is essentially a presidential detail. So when you've got that kind of thing, these resources are not infinite. And over again, I think from now on, we are likely to see some of those things come into conflict, maybe with Trump campaign, maybe with the Harris campaign, too.
All right. Joe Khalil with us. Joe, thank you. Time now for the full panel here on the Hill. Joining me now, May Mailman, Chris Steyerwalt, Julia Manchester, Scott Bolden. Hello to you all.
I feel full.
You feel full? Your hearts are full. Donald Trump's calling this election interference. Is he just setting himself up for this is the new election interference thing in case if he loses?
Well, I think he's calling for more resources. I mean, it cannot be the case that one candidate can campaign just differently than another because Donald Trump has a higher threat level against him. That is fundamentally anti-democratic. Now, do we like the way that he called it? You know, does this make us feel like he's warning about mail ballots? Yes, it does harken back to that. But I think it doesn't change the fact that you can't just allow two different campaigns depending.
So Washington, or at least lawmakers, Julia, gave another $230 million in Secret Service funding for the rest of the year.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's story over for the Trump campaign there.
No, it isn't. And it also comes as the Secret Service really overall is facing so much scrutiny as it is, not only from the Trump assassination attempts, but also you have this case about the alleged sexual assault that took place against a member of the Harris campaign. So you have the Secret Service under quite a bit of pressure right now. You have lawmakers trying to give funds, but the Trump campaign calling for more. I don't think it's the end for the Trump campaign. I think Trump has found a niche that, or not a niche, but an attack line he's going to continue to use against Harris.
All right. Meantime, over to the other side, the Biden administration is now looking to turn the tables on the border, announcing today that it is making asylum restrictions even tougher. Under the new rules, immigrants would be barred from being granted asylum when U.S. officials deem the border to be too overwhelmed. They lowered the threshold or at least made it longer. It used to be a week. Now it's 28 days. Scott, your party didn't really want President Biden to be stricter on the border. Now he's doing it. So why is he doubling down? Why is he doubling down? I mean, I saw Kamala Harris at the wall, and that thing was supposed to be awful. She was there, and now comes this.
She's 20 points down when it comes to how Americans feel they can take addressing immigration, one. Two, the restrictions are working under his executive order despite the Lankford legislation not going through, and now he's extending it. I mean, he's giving America what they want and restricting the borders. He's taking away arguments for the Republicans and the GOP and Donald Trump, and the Republicans don't seem to be happy about it. Pick your poison.
Is going on the offense here, for lack of a better term, is that the right move? Because we all know the timing here. There's 5 weeks to go until the election. Kamala Harris was out there at the border last week saying, I'm going to be tougher, and then bang, this comes out.
Remember when Donald Trump said he was going to make the government pay for in vitro fertilization for all Americans who want it?
Yeah.
You know, it's a silly season. We do not live in an age of nuance and erudition, and people paint in broad strokes, and they hit it hard. What the Biden administration and Harris are trying to say is, we hear you, we got it, we're doing it. And for Republicans, this is going to make them mad because they say, well, you could have done it sooner. It's not good enough. The question is it soon enough in the minds of voters? And for a lot of voters who are looking for an excuse to vote for Kamala Harris, this will be good enough.
Make you mad?
No, this is pure messaging.
Well, she's cool. She doesn't.
Actually,
it's a lot to get.
If anything, this shows me that the internal polling in the Harris campaign shows that they're still substantially underwater on immigration, because this executive order originally was in June, and now basically Biden says, I really mean it with this executive order. It's not really changing anything. It's just kind of tightening it. So to me, what that means is it's not working.
But Blake, one real quick point. Remember, the executive order, the numbers of individuals coming across the southern border
it's come down
to 2020 levels. Yep. And now they're bearing down on this even further.
So now I could ask, why didn't he do it sooner?
Well, okay. I'm not sure why he didn't do it sooner, but he's doing it now. And the problem is getting fixed, if not fixed already. And so it's good for America and good for good politics.
What does it tell you?
Look, it tells me.
Here we go.
Obviously, the southern border is of concern, but the timing of this certainly can't be ignored. We are seeing the Harris campaign address immigration or attempt to address immigration more head on. She visited the border on Friday, and then you have this executive order under the administration. It's something she can point to. Not saying that's why they're exactly doing it, but it's something she can certainly point to.
Let me leave with this. You said the other day that this was the time where you pick 3 messages and go with them, because that's where we are.
That's right.
Should this be one of her 3?
Yeah, for sure.
You think
for sure. And tomorrow night, when we have the vice presidential debate, if J.D. Vance wants to be of service to Donald Trump, he's going to get out there, and every other word that comes out of his mouth is going to be immigration, border, crisis, migrant, catastrophe, disaster, because that's what works for them, and that's the message that Republicans should lean on.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. Not done yet. The United States government, is it now leaning on Elon Musk? How one company run by the wealthiest man in the world is actually now trying to help in battered North Carolina. We'll explain what's going on there. White House talking about it today. Leland Vitter on the other side of the break.
I spoke to Elon. I'm getting him. We want to get Starlink hooked up because they have no communication whatsoever. And Elon will always come through. We know that.
All right, that, of course, Donald Trump speaking in the state of Georgia earlier today about getting Starlink to help those affected by Hurricane Helene. And now we've learned that FEMA is sending Starlink satellite systems to North Carolina and other states that have been impacted. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance, joins us now. You know, Leland, I was thinking earlier today, I said it to one of the folks on our team. I said, why aren't we putting Starlink all across the southeast United States right now? And it turns out, bang, you know, that was a decision, or at least we learned today that's happening. And I got to imagine that might be the future here as it relates to hurricanes and trying to get folks help and people back online.
Sure, and it's actually how we communicate a lot of times when we're out with crews, trying to bring everyone a story, and the cell phones towers are all down. And this has always been the challenge. You've covered a lot of hurricanes in Miami as well, and I did too, that in these first few days and hours,